Another week, another guest. Holy fuck, who do we have this week?
Okay, tonight we talked about lies in the textbooks, and you suggested, I think you're right, we should talk about the fossil record.
Oh, I can't wait to hear how the fossils in the geologic column sifted themselves so perfectly in the flood of Noah. Now, fortunately, this isn't actually a repeat topic. We had a previous video about something closely related to this on the geologic column, which relates very closely to the fossil record. So I started listening to this video, and Kent's guest Mike just, this is the, I'm not sure how to describe his interpretation of what the fossil record actually is. It's like a slow-motion train wreck that I was watching that you just can't pull yourself away from. He takes almost 6 entire minutes to completely not understand a single thing about the fossil record. Rather than play you all a 5-minute and 45-second clip, no shit, it was that fucking long, he describes the Earth as a ball of chocolate with layers where new material is added from outside the Earth to constantly cover the planet over and over. But that's not what happens. The material comes from deep in the Earth's crust, where it becomes exposed to the atmosphere. Now I get it. He's a medical doctor, so I don't expect him to have any real knowledge of any of this, but at least the guy can do is open one of those textbooks and read it to get at least a little bit of a basic understanding. Or a generic Google search will do the same shit. Instead, he just comes off as being completely clueless. No. Let me rephrase that. When it comes to the fossil record, he is completely clueless.
Sarcasm is unbecoming of you.
Well, this is not going to be too long of a video, since it's so closely entwined with the geologic column, but Kent says something interesting for me to address.
I tell him, there is no geologic column. This happened back in the 1700s when they made up the stupid law of superposition, that the top layer has to be younger. That's stupid. No, it doesn't. Is the top layer younger here?
No.
Shuffle a deck of cards. Is the top card younger? There is no law of superposition. Get that out of your head. So what happened in the late 1700s up to the middle 1800s, this became the Bible to the atheists and evolutionists. They said, wow, the Holocene era, that dirt's only 10,000 years old. Wait a minute. If the Archean era is 2.5 billion years old, where was the Holocene dirt sitting for 2.4999 billion years?
So the law of superposition is simply that the layers of rock at the bottom of the geologic column are older than the ones at the top. Kent brings out his sand toys and, well, he does something silly. In his sand toys, they are built so that the sand falls slowly to make those cute layers, putting the last layer at the top. It was laid down last. When you shuffle a deck of cards, the bottom card fell first and the top card fell, say it with me, last. So while I'm going to ripple shuffle, and you stick a card in the mid-shuffle, it's going to get buried under the other cards of the deck. It's not a great analogy, but if you think about it, the geologic column that contains the fossil record is sort of like that. So shuffle a deck of cards. Think of the bottom card as being the magma deep underground. Pull that card out from the bottom and place it on the top of the deck. But you can't move any of the other cards. You place it on top. That is now the last layer at the top. Let's try erosion. Take like half that deck of cards and set them aside. Now take a card from the bottom. Where can you put it? On top. Right. The new layer will always go onto the top of the deck. But when you think of each card as a layer in the column, you start to get a very simplistic idea of what the geologic column actually is. So in short, don't think of it as how old the rock layers are, but more how long have they been where they are. Now, can we please actually talk about the fossils?
You would have to see what we see. You would have to encase them immediately. You have pictures of fossils here on the property of animals giving birth, and it's a fossil, and it's literally like coming out. There's no way that could happen unless there was an immediate mudslide that encased them permanently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we would expect to see. Good job. So you do understand how the fossil record came to be. This is astounding. Or maybe volcanic ash burying everything in an area over the course of a few hours, like Mount St. Helens did when it erupted and covered the area several feet deep and buried several animals in there. And that's the point. He literally brought up a perfect example of how things can get buried throughout time. Good job.
It's crazy.
Well, they tell the kids in school that clams are found at the bottom of the so-called geologic column, which does not exist, because clams evolved first. I say, guys, clams are found at the bottom because they're already at the bottom when the flood starts. Wouldn't they be the first one buried? And birds are found on top, usually. They're the last ones to drown in the flood. Maybe they're sorted based upon their habitat, number one. That would be a logical way to sort them. Maybe based on mobility. Did you know clams can't run very fast?
Clams are all throughout the fossil record. So by your logic, Kent, the clams would have all been buried at the bottom and be primarily in the bottommost layers, gradually thinning out to none at the Holocene layers. But that's not what we see at all. We see an even distribution. Now, birds, we see them starting in the Cretaceous period at the end of the Mesozoic. But that's birds as we know them today, because we found that on today's birds are descendants from the dinosaurs from the earlier periods. However, we also see pterosaurs from all the way back to the Triassic period at the start of the Mesozoic. As for the clam joke, you're not funny, Kent. I would tell you to go stick your gravel pit playground, but I love to see how the Department of Health and Safety would have a visit to your place to see how well that place fares.
I tell in my tour about the tide going up and down is going to bring water in and out of the tidal bump. It has to. That's where the water coming from. It's just being sorted, moved around. And it's the tidal changes that cause the water to go back and forth. And that's what made all the layers to the earth.
That makes zero sense. Like, seriously none. Here's the stupid thing. Several times over these videos with Kent and Friend, they ask where the material came from for all the layers. So I want to ask him the same question. Where did they come from? We're talking a mile of rock in some places, in several others, it's several more miles of rock. If all of that was laid as new material, and he has issues with us saying it came out from underground in magma flows and mud and other ways, where does he think it came from? If all that mud didn't come from under the ground, what happened? And even if it did, with a mile of rock, the mud that used to be that rock would have had to exist in the floodwaters. 1 mile of water and 2 miles of rock equals very thick mud. So Noah's Ark was not floating on water, it was floating on thick mud. But then, not much tidal movement would occur at all. On top of that, even if it did, the tidal forces churning the material would not have allowed it to settle with other water shifting constantly. Nothing is moving back and forth like Ken said, it's moving around and around the globe. The bulge rotating around the Earth every 12 hours at 6 hours between high and low tide. And from there, we would see the fossil record sloping up into the mountains. So that can't be right. The liquid in the mud would have settled evenly at the lowest points, leaving the mountains bare. In short, we should not expect to see fossils at the top of mountains, if it was a global mud puddle. And yet we do. And in the same order we see them elsewhere. The fossil record is consistent throughout the entire geologic column, no matter the elevation.
So, what's the atheist response to this, Mike? What do they say about fossils being millions of years old?
Typically, carbon dating.
Are you serious? Carbon dating? Millions? No, just no. Radiometric dating. Say it with me, dipshit. Radiometric dating, not carbon. Carbon dating is not used for things that are millions or even hundreds of thousands of years old. 50,000 Years for carbon dating. I hate having to repeat this over and over. In short, if you don't get it and don't understand it, don't talk about it. Else that doctorate you have isn't really going to make you look good.
I usually tell people when I'm talking to them about carbon dating, I'm like, look, if you'll pay for it, I'll go find a rock in my backyard. We'll crack it into 5 pieces, and you pay to have it analyzed at 5 different labs around the world. I'm going to bet that they're going to come back with different results, and no one's ever taken me up on the offer because they don't want it to be wrong.
Or they didn't want to spend their money for your little game. Where did the rock come from? Where did it originate? If you can't answer that, the different labs are going to make assumptions, which will skew the results. Also, you are handling the rock. It's had time to be contaminated in your yard with fertilizers and such. So when they do the dating on that rock, it's going to be a no-brainer to deduce that it is a contaminated sample. Don't be that level of ignorant. And why are we talking about the geologic column anyway? The topic is about the fossil record. Let's get back to that, please.
Well, really, the carbon dating, it started with the geologic column. In 1830, they invented this stupid geologic column, and they gave each layer an age. And each fossil in that layer has that same age. And then they invented carbon dating much later after that. And so if the carbon date doesn't match the geologic date, they throw the carbon date out.
Well, at least he mentioned the fossils. So he's wrong. Where, yes, the geological column was discovered in the 1800s, we only understood that things were older than other things, but we didn't know just how old. All that we could at the point was say that Y was older than X and younger than Z for some time. Now, we started coming up with methods to actually date these findings, and that is what came in the early to mid 1900s. But there was never a definitive data set back in the 1800s at all. So Kent is a fucking moron. Surprise, surprise. But we knew that already.
The intelligent layman has long suspected circular reasoning.
Yeah, the chain of custody throughout the different environments. I mean, we're assuming here, right, that different environments cause these different things to die, right? It's interesting that all the fossils we find of the things that died were the largest animals out there.
The circular reasoning part at the start is Kent missing a different point about dating methods from a different video. You can see the fossils to date rocks and the rocks to date fossils bit on my channel. But as for Mike, let's see. He's of course wrong. Kent's clam is an example of that. But so are the abundance of microfossils we find. Tiny things like small shellfish that are otherwise very fragile. Insect fossils are abundant. The reason the large fossils make the headlines is because there are so many tiny ones that it's just not newsworthy when we find them. No one is talking about Kent's fossilized clams because there are just, as he admitted earlier, hundreds of thousands of them in just one place alone, not to mention others. So this is a direct lie from Mike, with Kent having already given the argument's proof against him. Good job, guys.
But they're all limited in size now, whereas before it was all bigger. It seems like whatever caused the environmental change made it unsustainable for larger animals to live. Probably oxygen, right? They would have needed more oxygen, let's say, to accept hydrogen at the end of the electron transport chain to sustain their larger muscles. They would have needed a lot of factors that, if the Earth's atmosphere changed, they would not be able to sustain life and would die.
Funny enough, there was more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere back then. More CO2 means plants are able to thrive for the herbivores to eat. Now, while we aren't yet absolutely certain why the dinosaurs were so large, what we can deduce is some likely reasons. One of which is also us. Humans, as a species, are getting taller, and the same goes for other animals. Evading predators are being too large to be taken down. Funny enough, there was more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere back then. More CO2 means plants are able to thrive for the herbivores to eat. Now, while we aren't yet absolutely certain why the dinosaurs were so large, what we can deduce is some likely reasons. One of which is also us. Now, I don't mean fursuiters or dogs. I mean humans. Humans as a species are getting taller and taller over the years. And the same goes for other animals. Evading predators or being too large to be taken down is another theorized reason, along with the plants. Having hollow bones, making the animals lighter, is yet another reason. A larger body allowing for better body temperature regulation is yet another. We may never know why they were so large, and we're still doing research on that. But regardless of it, they were big. And that's fine. But it doesn't say anything more about the fossil record just because for a time the dinosaurs were big.
Well, I'm a strong believer, other creationists are not, but I believe in what's called the canopy theory. There used to be a layer of ice over the Earth.
Nope! You can just stop that nonsense right there. This is a stupid concept and you know it. Fucking moron! Let's just fast forward to the important things, shall we, please?
So they taught us evolution in medical school. They told us that part of the embryological process included the embryos having gills that eventually turned into the ear bones, the ossicles they're called. Stapes, malleus, and forget the other one. Hooked to the tympanic membrane, goes through the middle ear into the oval window or whatever.
The human embryo does not contain gills. Never has. They have a pharyngeal arch that resembles gills, but they aren't actually gills. Don't be stupid and stop derailing. Notice I didn't say we never will have gills. We very well could in the future through evolution. I'm not a fortune teller, nor do I know what evolution is going to do next. They go on a tirade that can be summed up as, we don't like evolution, so God did it. I'd love for a Canidae to be the next sentient species. That would be badass. But then we will have human conventions where people will put on skin suits instead of fur suits, and that would just be weird.
And the same thing is true with the amount of material on the Earth. There's only so many atoms. You can only take it and move it around. This idea that it's been dipped in, like it's just layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of encapsulated fossils that you can dig down like a layer cake and see this is this old, this is this old, this is this old. It's not consistent with the fact that matter itself is conserved on the Earth and it only moves around. It doesn't ever increase in layers without it coming from somewhere else first.
So I have to tell you where he came from this. He was talking about old Roman currency, where they would shave off the edges to make new coins to dilute the currency and tried to equate it to evolution, and the Earth, where there is only so much material to make the coins, and there is only so much material on the Earth. So yes, the Earth is a semi-closed system. But the material comes from deep under the Earth's crust, and given enough time, yes, we will start losing the oldest layers to the deepest crevasses of the Earth. In some places, we already have, and we will never get down there to see what is at the center of Mount Everest and see what could be there. But the fact that we do have these layers, and they do have fossils showing up in a specific order consistently through these layers from one corner of the planet to the other, it tells us it can't have come from a singular event. There would be much more mixing of the fossils that are there. Now, I do think that Kent, at the end there, didn't mean to say geologic column. I think he did mean to say the fossil record, and like I said at the start of this video, they are two topics that are very closely related. The geologic column is the rock layers, and the fossil record is what is found inside those layers. Now, I'm still waiting for them to say something about the record other than clams at the bottom from earlier. I would like to see them address why we find simpler and simpler organisms the deeper down into the record we go. Think he'll address that?
No.
I agree. Now, we have been talking on this for a while, and they've been dancing around it. Let's see what happens next.
This is the number of words in the average textbook. I've got a huge collection of textbooks here. You're welcome to come. Don't take them out of my building, though, please. In the 1950s, the average textbook only had 2,000 to 3,000 words about evolution. In 1963, there were 33,000 words. Evolution became the state religion in the early 60s. With Madalyn Murray O'Hair and her stupid stuff that she did, okay? And Shemp. 1963 is when we began to see a great rise in sexually premarital sex for all kinds of ages. Sexual activity among high schoolers increased since 63. Sexually transmitted diseases went up. Unwed birth rates for 10 to 14-year-olds skyrocketed. Pregnancies went up 553%. Out of wedlock births, 1960s, when it began to go up. So I say there's a direct correlation. We teach the kids they're nothing but an animal. We wonder why they act like animals.
Oh boy. First off, correlation is not causation. This is a tangent I wasn't expecting to go down for this. But what else happened in the 1960s? First of which is the Civil Rights Act. This outlawed segregation, employment discrimination, strengthened voting rights, among other legal rights. Can we now say that Civil Rights Act is the cause of those increased unplanned pregnancies? Should we abolish the Civil Rights Act? Fuck no! That would be insane to even think of such a thing. The 1960s were a very special time of life for freedom in life. Now, the free love movement that happened in the 1960s as well. And what was that? A movement of people wanting a separation between the state and sex and romance. People were engaging heavily in intimacy from that point on, with sex being an act of showing love for one another. This caused an increase in birth rates. A liberation movement to engage more provocatively, I can say words, I know how words work, provocatively in people that wanted to be separated from the bullshit of what? Schools, the government, and church telling them that celibacy was the only way to go. Hey, lots of people wanting to fuck each other like rabbits might be a cause of unplanned births. And they weren't looking to learn about evolution at that point. Correlation is not causation. Find the actual plausible cause instead of making the statistics fit your narrative, guys. I'm going to leave that in because that was actually funny.
The other thing that I really I like to do is when I'm talking to an atheist, I'll use the word gene and cell interchangeably and see if they notice. I'll talk about a replicator cell and a replicator gene and see if they notice that whatever. And they don't. They typically don't. They don't know the difference between a gene and a cell.
So you're openly admitting to attempting to intentionally deceive the atheists you are having discussions with. Mike is telling everyone that he is willing to lie to get an edge. How Christian of you. Why should I trust anything you say from this point forward? Demon, what do you think we should tell this guy at this point?
Get the fuck out.
I can't disagree. Now, he goes on for a bit on abiogenesis, the origin of life. Unfortunately, Angel informs me that he was so rambly and all over the place, there was nothing really good to clip. But he describes abiogenesis, talks about the Miller-Urey experiment, and then says this.
They talk about how it was reproduced by the Urey-Miller experiment. It wasn't. And even if it was, it just shows that intelligent design was needed, as Kent says, to make this happen. You're just proving intelligent design.
I love it when they say things like this. It tells me one thing. He has zero idea what scientific experimentation actually is. None. Zero. Because if he did understand it, he would also understand that the experiment intentionally made ideal but naturally occurring conditions in a sterile testing area, then just let it run to see what happens. And holy fuck, it worked. We had the first evidence of the now theory of abiogenesis, aka the origin of life, exactly how we expected it would have occurred. The entire video just looks like two guys grasping at straws and hoping they get the right one when they're told none of them are the right one, and the guy with the right straw fucked off with the prize. Meanwhile, they're just shouting about how they need more straws. Okay, they're literally going fully off topic now.
God says, my people die for lack of knowledge.
Oh no. Someone get the crash cart from Mike and Kent. They're going into cardiac arrest of stupidity. Because they don't know shit.
This is going to be very entertaining.
You got it then?
Yeah, bitch.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Demon.
Yeah. Bye.
Fair enough. The rest of their video was just them preaching anyway. This was supposed to be about the fossil record, and they barely talked about it at all. They talked more about the geologic column and evolution, so not to disappoint, The fossil record exists in the geologic column. We use radiometric dating methods and other dating methods that have a lab-confirmed decay rate. For longer spans of time, we use multiple dating methods at the same time to get a better idea of the time scale to be more accurate. We date things called index fossils, small fossils in the rock, to learn about what time period those smaller fossils existed. So when we find a more valuable fossil in that same rock layer, we don't need to destroy parts of it to get an idea of how old the fossil is. When we consistently find the same larger fossils in the same rock layer or different consecutive layers, we get a really good idea of how long it's been since the creature was alive and for approximately how long that type of creature lived. Then looking up and down the column, we find animals with similar structures. We can follow the evolutionary chain through the eons to see things like our beloved horse with toes, the Eohippus, to the modern-day equine. Each step of the way, seeing a new, slow, and gradual transformation in the fossil record from one species to the next. And no miracle flood can make that happen. Only evolution and a hell of a lot of time. For now, I am Corsi, and this is...
Hold that thought.
What is it now?
Be a sport and grab Daddy another beer, would you?
Bite me after the intro. I am Corsi, and this is The Fluffy Atheist. If you like this, hit those like and subscribe buttons. And remember, a little research goes a long way. Let The Fluffy Atheist do it for you. Ow, I didn't mean that literally.